Thank you very much, William. Yeah, welcome to this session. I did not prepare any slides, so for 10 minutes it's hard to have slides and demos. I decided to go full into demos, so cross your fingers that this will work. This talk is about key value pair tables. So key value pair tables, what do I mean with that? If you take a look on this table, so I have a table, there's a key and there's a value. And this is a more or less a schema-less schema, because there's no really a schema. I mean, there's a schema, there's a key column, and there's a value column. But other than that, everything is very, very flexible. So there's city, and sometimes it's a Eindhoven, there's Seattle, there's first purchases. And usually this would be a raw key value model, but usually there's also an ID column. So I want to combine different things. So obviously there's 1, there's 2, and there's 3, and this is a common entity. So maybe this is a customer in a city, first purchase, the name, the revenue, the zip code, and then this is repeating for the next customer. It's another ID and another ID. And this is extremely flexible. So application developers usually like this, because if there's a new attribute appearing for the customer, they do not have to twiggle with alter database, alter schema, or whatever. They do not have to change the table structure, but it's the same table structure. We keep the key, the value, and we just add another rows, for example, 3, and then I have like a salary or something like that. So from application and filling this table, this is really flexible, and also for doing certain analysis, it's also rather flexible. So what I've got here is this the very same table, and then I have 2 slices up there. So I can filter my key by city and so on and so forth, and also the rows I can filter. So what I have here now, I have in my columns, I have the cities, which is Eindhoven and Seattle, and on the rows I have the name, because that's what I chose here, right? So I can see that, and then there are with the counts in there, so we can count how many customers we have in Eindhoven, for example. So there's 1 customer in Eindhoven, which is Markus. There's 2 customers in Seattle, which is Bill and Jeff, and the whole, this is 3 customers. For the names, we have individual names only once appearing in this list. So it's extremely flexible if I want to do analytics like that. And I implemented this for an insurance company. And when you apply for an insurance, you have to fill out a lot of forms, and they ask you a lot of questions. And we're doing analytics this way. Unfortunately, this is not the only way we want to do analytics. Sometimes we want to analyze things like in a common pattern, like that we have all the keys up there. So like we have the attributes in the columns. And then I want to have just the lines there and want to see the details per customer, right? So I have to pivot this table. And to pivot a key value pair table, there's a couple of things I can do. So one is I could use in Power BI, I can use a matrix visual. So for this matrix visual, I put the ID into the rows. There's 1, 2, 3 here. I put the key column in the columns, so I get all the different contents of the key column as my columns here in my matrix. And then I put the value section here. And as you can see here, hopefully you can read this. Please let me know if this is too small of a font. It tells not value, it tells first value. Because there could be that for the ID 1, I have different cities. Because this is an error, or maybe this is why it is. And then this matrix visual can only show the first one, the last one, or it can count. So I cannot decide here that I want to have different, like list all the values. This is not possible when I just do it with the visual. The other thing is that for the revenue, I would maybe expect that I get a sum of the revenues. I want to see what of revenue, what kind of sum of revenues or average of revenues or whatever I have. With the matrix visual, I cannot do that. So there's 3 solutions, at least I hope 2 I can present here in Power BI. Maybe we can also reach out for the SQL, depending on how fast I'm talking. 4 minutes gone. So one solution is that I want to pivot this with the help of DAX. So what I did here is that I have the same table now, again, with the IDs, the different city and the revenue. And what you can see here, I have a total here. And what I did here, I also use a matrix visual, but I don't use the value and the key value from a source table, but I created measures. So I created a measure for the city, for example. And maybe if you're new to, this was the wrong, very interesting, what I'm doing here. The one key, I wanted to increase the font size here. Here we go. So for the city, I decided to so I want to avoid that something in the total appears. So that's why I'm checking if the source ID has one value. In the total, it's different IDs, so there's not one value. Only if it's only one value, I show the value, right? That's why I get Seattle, Elkhofen here, but nothing in the total. For the revenue, I also implemented something in DAX. And what I did here is that I check if the key is a revenue, then I convert whatever the value is with the value function. The value function in DAX allows me to convert a string into an integer. That's what I'm doing here, only for the revenue. So deciding on if it's a revenue, I convert this. If it's, for example, the city, then I do the other logic. So with that, I now have a sum, or I could of course also do an average or whatever. So I can distinguish different data types for my different columns. The backdraft here is that I have to create measures every time there's a new key appearing, a new attribute in the source table. I have to come here and define a new measure for this new attribute. To make this a little bit easier, I came up with a solution which is more generic. So this is much more of DAX statement now. The first is a variable which allows me to, or where I decided what are the numeric values. So the revenue is numeric. That's why it's appearing up there. And then I just pasted in the code from previously, right? Remember, I take the sum from the value if it's a numeric value. So if it's a revenue, then I calculate this into an integer. If it's not, then I use the other logic and show this as a string. But I'm avoiding that the minimum or the last value is appearing in the total. So this is what we see here. So this is the same result, a different result, but now I have the key and the generic value in here. And over the filters, I can decide what kind of values I want to see. So maybe I don't need the zip, then I remove it from here. So I have full control over what I'm showing in my table over DAX. But then I cannot tweak the format. As you can see here, the city is also now right aligned because this is just one measure, and this one measure can only have one format options, and this option is now a numeric, and that's why all the texts are now right aligned. So I'm not really satisfied with the solution. So luckily, we have a tool called Power Pivot in Power BI. A tool called Power Query in Power BI, and I jump over there. Let's walk you through the final solution because I do not want to run out of time. Is that I start the very beginning here. I start with the steps with the original table, right? We have the ID, with the key, with the value. I did not tell you that I also have the type is delivered from my data source. In this case, the type equally matches the data types we have in Power BI. It could also be something else, like in one project, I get a 1 if it's a text and a 2 if it's an integer. We can also work with that. Then I remove this type column because this should not be part of my table. I can change the type, so make sure that I have the right data types for everything, and then I pivot this table. So what this is just a matter of clicks in Power Query, and then we get the pivoted version of that. So we get all the columns now, all the keys now as columns in here. The backdraft here is again, I have to define the data types individually. That means if a new key, a new attribute appears, I have to go here and find this new key and change the right data type. And that's what I want to avoid. I want to have this very flexible. And that's what this solution is about. So as the next step, I introduce a step where I just filter by the key and their types. And then I have blocks. So I have this text block here and I have this integer block here, where I then take this information, for example, for the integers. I filter down on only those attributes which are integer. And the next one, I remove the type again. I make a list out of that. And this list I use as a parameter for this transform column types. So long story short is that now for the revenue, I get this integer set without me applying the correct data types. But Power BI, Power Query applies the data type delivered in the type column. So at the very end, when we take a look here, at the change type, I have the right type for the revenue, for the zip, for the purchase. This is a date, and so on and so forth. So I've got 1 minute left. So I will use this 1 minute to add another attribute here. So I add something else. 1, 2, 3, and this should be the salary. Salary. Something is wrong with my keyboard here. So salary. Copy this down here. And then we make 1 million or whatever this is, 2 something, and only 5. And this should be, for example, a currency. So just add data. I don't have to, oh, the data is wrong. Of course, I have a typo in here, so I'm running out of time. Sorry for that.
I'll allow it.
One little chance here to correct this. And then to the final, if we go to the very end, now we see the salary, and the salary is now, okay, I have a typo in here. Obviously, this didn't work. Sorry. Currency, this is case sensitive. I really hate Power Query for being case sensitive. So, and now we have the salary, which is now of type salary. So I don't have to do anything. If new data is delivered, I get the right data. If I load this, I can then work with different columns in Power BI. This was about key value.